Have you ever noticed how some people seem to possess an almost supernatural control over their environment without uttering a single word? They don't shout, they don't beg, they don't argue, they simply withdraw, and suddenly, everything changes. The energy shifts. People start to question, to chase, to feel unsettled. Now imagine if you did the same. What if you stopped reacting immediately to everything that demands your attention? What if you chose silence instead of the automatic response? What if you chose retreat instead of explosion? What do you think would happen? That's where true power lies. When you stop being always available emotionally, physically, psychologically, the world around you goes into crisis. Because people have become accustomed to controlling you through your reactions, through your impulses, through your predictability. But the day you choose to withdraw, the game changes completely. And those who thought they knew you, those who thought they had you figured out, suddenly realize they know absolutely nothing about you. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, said something profound. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Think about this for a moment. When you become inaccessible, who really gets desperate? Who becomes irritated? Who tries to provoke you just to elicit some emotional response? This reveals far more about them than it does about you. And more importantly, it reveals how much you've been manipulated without even realizing it. You keep giving yourself away to please others, to maintain a false peace, to avoid losing people who, deep down, were never really with you in the first place. And with every forced yes, every immediate response, every emotional reaction, you give away a piece of your energy, a fragment of your soul. And at the end of the day, what's left? Tiredness, frustration, and emptiness you cannot explain. But I'll tell you why this happens. It's because you are too available for those who don't deserve even a minute of your silence. This message is not about turning your back on the world or becoming cold and indifferent. It's about choosing yourself. It's about learning what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, complete. And this process begins when you understand that silence can be stronger than 1,000 arguments, that withdrawal, when it comes from awareness and not from escape, is an act of tremendous power. So I ask you now, looking directly at this truth, how long will you continue to be controlled by the emotions of others? How long will you react like a puppet every time someone pokes at your wounds? Maybe it's time to cut those strings, to withdraw, to become a mystery. Because when you stop being available to everyone, everything changes. In 6 parts, we are going to analyze the aspect of availability and how you can combat it and move in silence. Part 1. The prison of excessive availability. You have been taught, from childhood, to always be present, to respond quickly, to please others, to say yes, even when everything inside you wanted to say no. Since you were young, you've been conditioned to believe that your worth lies in how available you are to others, to your parents, your friends, your partners, your colleagues, even to strangers. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. This excessive availability is not a virtue. It is a prison. And as long as you continue to think that you need to be accessible all the time, emotionally or otherwise, you will be manipulated, drained, and forgotten as soon as you are no longer useful. Do you know why this happens? Because being always available makes you predictable, and everything that is predictable becomes a tool. People start to use you as an emotional emergency button. They press it when they want attention, relief, validation, comfort. And then they put you back on the shelf until they need you again. But you don't realize this is happening because you are trapped in an illusion. The illusion that being present for everyone will somehow make someone be present for you. But it doesn't work that way. It never has, and it never will. Carl Jung spoke extensively about what he called the persona. This mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized by society. And it is exactly this mask, this false self, that keeps you overly available. You say it's okay when you're suffocating inside. You respond to messages immediately even when you're exhausted. You explain yourself, justify yourself, defend yourself as if you owe something to the world, to every person who demands your energy. But the truth is this: the more you place yourself at the center of other people's stages, the more you disappear from your own life. Being available all the time is a subtle form of self-abandonment. It is a disguised way of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, trying to control the image others have of you. But this control comes at a price, and the price is your peace. The price is your vital energy being distributed as if it were infinite, when in fact it is limited, very, very limited. Think about the people who want you available all the time. Do they actually want you, or do they want what you provide? They want validation, they want company, they want distraction, they want emotional comfort. But when you change, when you set a boundary, when you refuse to react in the ways they expect, those same people get irritated. They accuse you of being different. They say you're weird, cold, distant. It's not because you actually changed. It's because you stopped being functional for them. You stopped playing the role they assigned to you. And here's the cruelest point of all: the more available you are, the less value others give you. The more you react to something, the more you bind yourself to it. The more you try to fight against what bothers you, the more power you give it over your life. People who live emotionally drained, who feel constantly exhausted despite not doing physically demanding work, are not weak. They are simply misdirected. They are pouring their life force into 1,000 different directions instead of conserving it and directing it consciously toward what truly matters. And do you know what happens to someone who lives in a state of constant exhaustion? They become vulnerable, and when you are vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative people can sense this. Opportunistic individuals notice it. Emotionally needy people are drawn to it. They can tell that you don't know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're always trying to fix everyone's problems, always trying to make everyone happy. And they take advantage of it. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but they do. Jung said something revolutionary. A healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within the system. This means knowing how to say no without drowning in guilt. It means knowing how to remain silent without feeling like a coward. It means knowing how to observe situations before jumping into action. Because true power, real power, is not in reacting. It's in choosing when and how to act. And this level of self-mastery is only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses, your own triggers, your own automatic patterns. Think about this honestly. How many times have you lost sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent hours, even days, ruminating on what you should have said to someone? How many times have you tried desperately to understand why someone treated you poorly, replaying the situation over and over in your mind? This is energy being drained without any return. You are keeping alive ghosts that should have died long ago. You are feeding emotional dynamics that only continue to exist because you insist on responding, on engaging, on trying to fix what cannot be fixed. Psychic energy, when understood properly, is like a force field around you. When it's well guarded, when it's conserved and directed consciously, it creates presence. You enter a room and people feel your energy. They respect you without you having to demand it. They listen when you speak because your words carry weight. But when your energy is poorly managed, when it's scattered in 1,000 directions, you become invisible. You become reactive, fragile, easily manipulated, and the world has no mercy for those who give in easily. Therefore, you must start observing your own triggers. What makes you react automatically? What situations, What words, what behaviors from others cause you to immediately lose your center, your peace, your composure? These triggers are the exact points where your energy escapes. These are the wounds that others consciously or unconsciously poke at to get a reaction from you. And this is precisely where you need to do the inner work. Not to become cold, not to become indifferent or unfeeling, but to become selective, to become sovereign over your own emotional state. To stop being a puppet controlled by the strings of other people's words and actions. And here comes one of Jung's greatest revelations. When you learn to conserve your energy, when you stop reacting to every provocation, you begin to break the projections that others have placed upon you. And this bothers people. It disturbs them deeply. Because now we are entering dangerous territory, the territory of silent manipulation. And in the next part, we will explore exactly how opportunistic people feed off your energy and why your unavailability completely disarms their games. Get ready to look clearly into the eyes of those who have been draining you without you even realizing it. Part 3. The mechanics of manipulation and projection. You think you're in control of your reactions. You believe your emotional responses are conscious choices that you're making freely. But the truth is much darker than that. Most of your emotional responses are programmed. They're automatic. And those who understand this, whether consciously or instinctively, manipulate you easily. Opportunistic people don't need to shout at you. They don't need to threaten you or force situations. They simply trigger the buttons you've left exposed, the wounds you haven't healed, the insecurities you carry. And you react, every single time, like clockwork. Carl Jung called this psychological mechanism projection. It's the process through which people project onto others what they cannot see or accept in themselves. They transfer their own unresolved issues, their own shadows, their own fears and insecurities onto you. But there's another side to this phenomenon that few people notice or understand. While others are projecting onto you, you also become the receptacle for these projections. You become the screen onto which they project their movies. And the more emotionally available you are, the more reactive you are, the more you become a blank canvas for whatever they need you to be. Think about that friend who only reaches out when they're in crisis. Think about that partner who always needs you to save the day, to fix their problems, to make them feel better about themselves. Think about that person who praises you and seems to value you, but only as long as you're useful to them, only as long as you're serving their needs. None of this is by chance. None of this is random. They are not relating to the real you. They are relating to the idea of you, to the role you've agreed to play in their psychological drama. And why do you agree to play these roles? Because you're afraid. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of not being loved. Afraid of being abandoned, rejected, left alone. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen through shouting or obvious control tactics. It happens in the silence of guilt. It happens when you feel that you owe something to the other person. When you believe you need to be available, you need to help, you need to understand, even when doing so destroys you inside, even when it depletes your energy completely. And here is the central point, the key insight. The manipulator doesn't need to actively control you. They don't need to force you to do anything. They just need you to keep reacting the same way you've always reacted. They just need you to remain predictable. But when you stop reacting, the entire game breaks. When you start saying no without explanation, when you respond with silence instead of justification, when you withdraw instead of engaging, the projections begin to crumble. The mask they've put on you falls away. And this leaves people deeply unsettled, because they no longer know who you are. The version of you they created in their minds no longer matches reality. And worse now, they are forced to look at themselves. Now they have to confront their own emptiness, their own needs, their own unresolved issues. And not everyone is prepared for that. Your unavailability becomes a threat. not because you're doing anything to them, but because it forces them to confront their own inner darkness, their own void. The silence you offer reveals the internal noise they don't want to hear. It exposes the dependency they don't want to acknowledge. And then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama, the accusations that you've changed, that you're being selfish, that you're not the person you used to be. But understand this clearly. These reactions are not because you're wrong. They're because you stopped serving as a convenient mirror for their projections. You stopped being the emotional emergency button they could press whenever they needed relief. Jung said something profound. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle of reactivity, the other person's shadow begins to emerge. Their darkness, which they've been avoiding through their relationship with you, suddenly has nowhere to hide. And this is unbearable for those who have always used you as an escape from themselves. But what about you? Are you ready to deal with the discomfort of being misunderstood? Are you prepared to be rejected or even attacked for the simple act of protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that comes after the rupture, after the boundary, after the no? Because it is precisely in that silence, in that uncomfortable space, that a new kind of power is born. A power that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. A power rooted in your own being, not in external validation. And that is what we will talk about now. In the next part, you will understand why silence can be the most devastating weapon of the human psyche and how it completely changes the dynamic between you and everyone around you. Part 4. The devastating power of strategic silence. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to respond quickly, to win pointless debates, to prove their point even if it costs them their own peace. Social media has amplified this to an extreme degree, everyone shouting into the void, desperate for attention, for validation, for someone to acknowledge their existence. But there is a power that few people know about, and even fewer have mastered, the power of silence. Not the silence of passivity or cowardice, but conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence. The kind of silence that is not absence, but amplified presence. Carl Jung saw silence, not as a void or emptiness, but as fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting to every stimulus, you begin to observe, and by observing, you start to see patterns that previously went completely unnoticed. You see emotional repetitions in yourself and others. You recognize manipulation games. You identify cycles of self-sabotage that have been running your life for years. Silence allows for lucidity. And lucidity is extremely dangerous for those who have built their power on controlling your reactions. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond to their messages? How they become anxious when you don't explain yourself? How they feel threatened when you simply disappear from their emotional radar? It's not because they miss you. It's not because they care so deeply about you. It's because your silence takes away their narrative control. While you're speaking, while you're explaining, while you're defending yourself, you're still in their game. You're still playing by their rules. But when you are silent, when you refuse to engage, you change the rules entirely. You shift the power dynamic. And that completely unbalances anyone who thrives on your predictable reactions. True silence is not the absence of voice. It is mastery over your own energy. It is the conscious refusal to be dragged down by someone else's emotions, someone else's chaos, someone else's need for drama. It is the deliberate choice not to engage in battles that are not worth your wear and tear. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires this kind of distancing. It requires stepping back from the noise of the collective, from the constant demands of society, from the pressure to conform and please. Because only in silence can you listen to yourself. Only in silence can you hear the voice of your own soul without the world's interference. But don't be fooled, silence has a price. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played in their lives. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through the lens of their own projections. It will make you seem cold, distant, even arrogant to those who benefited from your constant availability. But all of this, all of these accusations, all of this discomfort is simply a reaction from people who never wanted to deal with your depth. They only wanted your utility. They only wanted what you could do for them. And here is a hard truth you need to hear. The more you mature spiritually and psychologically, the more selective you become with your words. Because you begin to understand that each sentence is an energetic investment. Each conversation requires energy. Each interaction has a cost. And not everyone deserves access to your truth. Not everyone has earned the right to your inner world. Sometimes, silence is not retreat. Sometimes, it's not weakness or avoidance. Sometimes, silence is sovereignty. It is the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is profoundly uncomfortable for others because it forces them to deal with their own thoughts, with their own internal noise. When you're not filling the space with explanations and justifications, they're left alone with themselves. And this discomfort reveals more about them than any argument of yours could ever reveal. You don't need to explain your absence. Your absence explains itself. And those who feel threatened by it, those who become angry or manipulative in response to your silence, reveal exactly how much they depended on your imbalance to maintain their own sense of control. But the most powerful silence is not the one that disturbs others. It's the silence that reconstructs you from within, the silence that connects you to something beyond external approval, beyond the constant need for validation. It is in this internal space, free from the demands of others, that you begin to recover your vital energy. It is here that you reconnect with your essence, with who you truly are beneath all the masks and roles and expectations. And this is precisely what we will explore in the next part. Because it's not enough to just cut out the external noise. You need to relearn how to use your energy consciously. To choose where it goes, where it stays, and most importantly, where it should never be wasted again. It's time to learn to be selective with your own soul. Part 5. Becoming Selective. The Practice of Conscious Unavailability. No use understanding all of this intellectually if, in practice, you continue saying yes when you mean no. If you continue responding to messages that bother you, participating in empty conversations, and maintaining relationships that only exist out of inertia or obligation. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. It's spiritual entertainment. It makes you feel enlightened without actually changing anything in your life. True transformation begins when you firmly decide to become selective. And this requires emotional discipline. It requires practice. It requires the willingness to be uncomfortable for a while. Conscious unavailability is not about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent to the suffering of others. It's about no longer being accessible to anyone at any time for any reason. It's about taking back control of your own energy, your own time, your own peace. And this starts with small actions. Simple decisions that compound over time. Not responding immediately to every message, letting hours pass, letting days pass if necessary. Breaking the expectation that you're always available at the press of a button. Breathing before reacting. When someone says something that triggers you, pause, count to 10, feel the impulse to react, but don't act on it immediately. Create space between stimulus and response. Leaving a discussion before being dragged into chaos. You don't have to stay until the bitter end of every argument. You can simply walk away. You can say, "I'm done with this conversation," and leave. Turning off your phone without guilt. Your phone is a tool. It doesn't own you. You don't owe anyone constant accessibility. Saying not today. Saying I'm not interested. Saying I won't get involved. Simple statements with no elaborate explanations attached. But here's the most important part, the part that most people struggle with. You don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation of why you're not available. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. And this, for many people, is absolutely unforgivable. Because when you refuse to explain yourself, when you simply state your boundary and hold it, you take away the other person's power to keep you trapped within an emotional narrative where you are always the helpful one, the understanding one, the accessible one. Carl Jung understood that every genuine process of individuation goes through a period of isolation. But this is not a depressive isolation, not a lonely withdrawal born from pain or rejection. It's a sacred isolation. It's a deliberate time of inner retreat where you relearn to listen to your own voice without the world's interference. It's a period where you rebuild your identity, not based on the gaze of others, not based on external validation, but from your own center, from your own truth. Want to know a reliable thermometer for your evolution, for your growth? Observe who starts to distance themselves from you when you become more reserved. Observe who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting. Observe who accuses you of having changed when you finally start to protect yourself. These are not signs that you're doing something wrong. These are proof that you have begun to free yourself from invisible chains you didn't even know were there. Being unavailable is uncomfortable at first. I won't lie to you about that. You will feel guilty. You will think you're being selfish. You will hear voices, both internal and external, telling you that you're being too harsh, too cold, too unloving. But this is part of the deconstruction process. You have spent your entire life being conditioned to put yourself second, to prioritize everyone else's needs above your own. It's completely natural that change would cause discomfort not only in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old version. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world's demands, you are saying yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you are reaffirming that your peace is worth more than any false connection, any superficial relationship, any social obligation. And when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop justifying your choices, you begin to be respected. Even if it's only by a few people, even if you lose many along the way. But not everyone is ready for this type of presence. Your emotional absence will expose wounds in others that they don't want to face. It will reveal how much they depended on your emotional chaos, on your reactivity, to feel in control of the relationship. And it is at this moment that the rupture comes. The separation, the distancing. And with the rupture comes pain, loneliness, estrangement. The feeling that you are losing something valuable, when in fact you are just freeing yourself from what was never truly yours to begin with. But what happens after that? What comes after the distancing? What is born from the silence, from the solitude? In the final part, we will talk about this. About the rebirth that only happens when you have the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, and to become whole on your own terms. It's time to understand why the loneliness of the strong is the path to true freedom. Part 6. The loneliness of the strong and the rebirth of self. When you stop being available to everyone, when you finally set firm boundaries and choose your own peace, something profound begins to happen. First comes the silence. An uncomfortable silence that seems to scream inside your chest. You wonder if you did the right thing. You question whether you're being too harsh, too rigid, too unforgiving. You worry that you're losing people who once mattered to you, people who liked you. But gradually, if you can sit with the discomfort and not run back to your old patterns, this silence transforms. It begins to cleanse your mind. It begins to calm your nervous system. It begins to heal the parts of you that were fragmented by constantly giving yourself away. And then comes solitude. But this is not the solitude of absence, the loneliness of being unwanted or unloved. This is the solitude of total presence, presence with your own self. This is the solitude of the strong, the solitude of one who no longer betrays themselves to keep others close. And in that space, in that sacred aloneness, something miraculous begins to happen. Where there was once confusion, clarity enters. Where there was once anxiety and restlessness, peace enters. Where there was once neediness and dependence on others for your sense of worth, a new kind of strength enters. The strength of being whole within yourself. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation, becoming who you really are, requires you to distance yourself from the collective for a time. You must disidentify from the mask, from the persona you've been wearing. You must walk alone for a while. And that is exactly what you're doing when you decide to become consciously unavailable. You are not fleeing the world. You are not becoming a hermit or rejecting all human connection. You are simply returning to yourself. You are coming home to your own soul. It is at this point in the journey that you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You cease to be shaped passively by circumstances, by other people's expectations, by the constant demands of the world. Instead, you begin to shape your reality from within, from your own center, from your own values and vision. The people who feel uncomfortable with your absence, who criticize your transformation, who say you've changed, they reveal something important. They reveal that they never truly wanted you. They wanted the role you played. They wanted the function you served in their lives. And now that you no longer fit into that box, now that you've outgrown the character they assigned to you, they don't know what to do with you. And that is liberating. Deeply, profoundly liberating. You will lose people in this process. That is inevitable, but you will find yourself. You will distance yourself from places, situations, and dynamics that were never meant for you. But you will reconnect with your essence, with the truth of who you are. You will become misunderstood by many. But finally, you will begin to be respected by those who matter, by those who can see and appreciate your depth. Because when you are no longer available for just anything, when you are no longer accessible to everyone, you become valuable. You become rare. You become unforgettable. And don't be fooled into thinking this is the end. This is a rebirth. This is a new beginning. This is the start of a life where you are no longer available for emotional crumbs, for mind games, for shallow connections disguised as deep intimacy. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, with your truth, with your wholeness. You only engage with people and situations that honor the work you've done to become who you are. This is what Jung meant by individuation. It's not about perfection. It's not about becoming some ideal version of yourself that exists only in theory. It's about becoming authentic. It's about integrating all the parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability into a coherent whole. And this wholeness cannot be achieved while you're constantly fragmenting yourself to fit into other people's expectations. Now let me ask you directly, are you ready for this new path? Are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even hated in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being yourself, fully and unapologetically? Because that is the price, and it's not a small one. You will sit alone sometimes when everyone else is at the party. You will be quiet when everyone else is shouting for attention. You will say no when everyone expects you to say yes. You will walk away when everyone expects you to stay and fight. And in those moments, you will question yourself. You will wonder if you're making a mistake. You will feel the pull to go back to the old way, the comfortable way, the way where at least you knew what to expect. But if you can resist that pull, if you can stay true to yourself even in the discomfort, you will discover something extraordinary. True self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you to be alone for a while. Because the truth is, you were already alone. You were alone in a crowd of people who didn't truly see you. You were alone while surrounded by relationships that didn't nourish your soul. You were alone while being constantly available to everyone except yourself. At least now, in this conscious solitude, you are alone with purpose. You are alone with dignity. You are alone with the one person you can never escape yourself, and you're finally learning to be good company for that person. The loneliness of the strong is not a curse. It's a passage. It's a transition from one way of being to another, from dependence to independence, from seeking approval to seeking authenticity, from being loved for who you pretend to be being respected for who you truly are. And on the other side of this loneliness, you will find something beautiful. Connections that are real, relationships that honor your boundaries, people who love you not for what you can do for them, but for who you are in your essence. But you have to walk through the fire first. You have to endure the silence. You have to face the discomfort of being selective, of being unavailable, of being misunderstood. Conclusion: your choice, your freedom. So here we are, at the end of this journey of understanding. But really, this is just the beginning. Because understanding is nothing without application. Knowledge is worthless without action. You now understand the trap of excessive availability. You know how your psychic energy is being drained by people and situations that don't deserve it. You've seen the mechanics of manipulation and projection. You've learned about the devastating power of strategic silence. You've been given practical tools to become more selective. And you've glimpsed what awaits you on the other side, the rebirth that comes through conscious unavailability. But none of this matters unless you actually do something with it. The question is not whether you understand these concepts intellectually. The question is, will you live them? Will you embody them? Will you make the difficult choices required to reclaim your energy and your freedom? Will you say no the next time you want to say no, even if it disappoints someone? Will you remain silent the next time you feel the impulse to defend yourself against baseless criticism? Will you withdraw from situations that drain you, even if others judge you for it? These are not rhetorical questions. They are real choices you will face, probably today, certainly this week. And each time you choose yourself, each time you honor your boundaries, each time you refuse to give away your energy to those who don't value it, you become stronger. You become more whole. You become more free. This is the path of individuation. This is the journey to becoming who you truly are, and it's not an easy path. Jung never promised it would be. But it's the only path that leads to genuine freedom, authentic peace, and real self-respect. So I ask you one final time, are you ready to be misunderstood in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to endure the loneliness of the strong? Are you prepared to choose your peace over other people's comfort? If your answer is yes, if something in you resonates with this message, then you've already taken the first step. Awareness is the beginning, but commitment is what transforms awareness into reality. Choose yourself. Protect your energy. Become consciously unavailable to what doesn't serve your highest good, and watch as your entire life transforms. The power has always been yours. You've just been giving it away. Now it's time to take it back. Now it's time to become whole.